So it's all about, to accomplish that, it's about preventing the diseases altogether with vaccine programs and management and environmental controls and everything like that, rather than just putting out fires and diseases when they arise.
Welcome, everyone, to today's episode of the Swine Canada podcast. And with me today, I have Dr. Kurt Preugschas, I hope I got that right, who is a veterinarian and partner at Precision Veterinary Services. So thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, Kurt, just because some of our listeners might not be familiar with who you are, I'll just ask you to kind of introduce yourself and let us know a little bit about your journey so far.
Okay, yes. Hi, everybody. So I guess I like to start by saying I grew up on a pig farm in kind of northwest Alberta, and my dad poisoned my mind. So I've stayed into the swine industry and loving it. So I graduated from Western College of Veterinary Medicine in Saskatoon in 2010 and jumped right into swine medicine with swine health professionals in Manitoba. So I spent a couple of years there, kind of got thrown into a lot of stuff and seen a lot of pigs and a lot of diseases, and it was fantastic and great mentorship from those guys. And then I came to Alberta to be closer to both my wife's and my family, and worked with I guess it was now it's Prairie Livestock Veterinarians, but it used to be Prairie Swine Health for 2 years there. And then I went to Innovative Veterinary Services for about 4.5 years in Red Deer still. And then in 2019 started Precision Vet Services with my partners and have been really lucky and been kind of here ever since. And kind of look, my area, I guess, is central and northern Alberta, and I have a couple clients in northern BC as well. But I always joke with Cordell, my partner, that I'm Highway 1 North. So it's quite a large territory that I cover.
That's pretty big, yeah. That's almost all of it.
Exactly, yeah.
I don't know if I would talk about it as being poisoned your mind. I think the difference is a lot of us had to get into swine by accident, so you just got in right away, and you didn't have to go through realizing the error of your ways, trying to go somewhere else first. So I think that's good. Obviously, you've had a lot of experience in the area. So I think this will be a good discussion about today's topic, which you kind of mentioned, being that optimizing production and performance with preventive medicine, which I think is probably one of your major roles in this. Hopefully you're not always reacting to stuff that's going on, right? So I guess we'll just start off by what you mean when you're talking about preventive medicine and how that can, help optimize.
Yeah, so my goal in life is that I guess old veterinary medicine was the worst day for the farmer is the best day for the veterinarian, right? And my goal in life is the best day for the producer or the farmer is the best day for the veterinarian. So it's all about, to accomplish that, it's about preventing the diseases altogether with vaccine programs and management and environmental controls and everything like that, rather than just putting out fires and diseases when they arise. So that's really been the primary focus is, understanding the whole picture of health and coming together to kind of prevent diseases through vaccine protocols and production records and understanding where their kind of strengths and weaknesses are and opportunities and building that all together ultimately.
Yeah. So I was going to ask, what kind of things would you look for? You've mentioned some of them, so I guess I'll push a little bit more for more information on where you see or what the different aspects are and how you approach those and how they are incorporated all into making sure that things are going well and that you are going to, like you said, prevent those outbreaks.
Yeah. So I think first step that I find is critical is actually going on farm and kind of understanding the whole business, really, the business and the flow of how pigs work, because every farm is different and every farm has different kind of constraints and bottlenecks. And so first of all, going to the farm, seeing the pigs for myself, understanding those flows, understanding the different health challenges ultimately within each kind of component of their farm, and really, building that knowledge on the health of each farm. Then from there, I can kind of, once I understand the health and the challenges and the opportunities, then I can go in and develop kind of sound protocols to sort of limit the impact of those different areas. So for example, let's say they have had erysipelas outbreaks in their finisher, or they're seeing erysipelas on their kill sheet, and maybe they've been vaccinated in the past with one product, but they're still seeing that. So then we would review that whole process, how they're doing it, and maybe come up with a new vaccine protocol, both on the sow side and on the piglet side, to kind of optimize that immunity and prevent those kind of costly erysipelas outbreaks that would normally happen in the late finisher. So that would be kind of one area I would say that is just really, I think the advantage that I have as a kind of an independent veterinarian is I can look at every individual farm and kind of customize protocols that suits their needs best. So rather than just kind of have a blanket protocol that just apply that to everybody, no, we go in and look at, okay, some farms say, I only can do 1 dose program. I'm not going to do a second dose. No matter what you tell me, Kurt, it's going to be 1 dose. So I say, okay, so let's do the best we can with this 1 dose vaccine protocol. Or if other farms, they can say, yeah, we'll do 2 dose if you think that makes sense. And we'll go in and, we'll kind of, with different vaccines, kind of optimize with those 2 dose program and get the most out of that protocol. So, that's kind of the starting point, is first understanding the health, then understanding where we need for vaccines. Of course, there's sometimes we would use strategic medicine as well, antibiotics. So if we know that predictably we're going to see some issues in piglets, let's say a week after weaning, well, we can go in there at, let's say, 3 or 4 days after weaning and water medicate kind of in a strategic timing, so that rather than having pigs die and get sick on a weekly basis, we can prevent that with a really focused, targeted, short-term antibiotic treatment. And then it's much cheaper at that age than dealing with all the side effects and costs of treatment and everything else later. So those are a couple of examples.
Yeah. So I guess maybe, outside of the typical vaccine and, the actual medication and everything that you would incorporate, like how much do you maybe evaluate or work on biosecurity protocols or nutrition? Because I know vets like to dabble in nutrition. Maybe you don't. We talked about it briefly a couple of weeks ago. What's going on with the nutrition? We'll blame the nutritionist for it. We'll blame the vets, right? Like, so how much how much are you involved in those other things, and where would you make recommendations or see issues that generally pop up?
Yeah, no, for sure. So the great aspect of being in Alberta, I would say, in central and northern Alberta, is we're very lucky with regards to a lot of diseases. So we, a lot of my day is spent on production and biosecurity, and I try not to do the nutrition. I try to pass that off to the nutritionists, but inevitably our worlds collide on a regular basis, and nutrition, of course, affects health, and health affects nutrition. So we're, like you said, I like to blame the nutritionist. If something's wrong, it's the feed's fault. But in seriousness, I would say that when something's going on, I'll definitely try to bring the nutritionists involved and collaborate and kind of get their perspective as to what could be contributing. And so that's definitely a part of my job for sure. On biosecurity, definitely that's been a huge part of my job over the years. There's obviously the external biosecurity, preventing the diseases from entering the farm. I think as an industry in Western Canada, I would say we've done a great job on that for many, many years. There's been lots of programs from the governments, from the Canadian government and the provincial governments and the provincial pork boards to kind of support that. So we've done, that's the number one, obviously. Preventing the disease from entering the farm is top of mind. So if we don't have PRRS, we don't have myco, well, that's the game changer. That's the true preventative medicine, right? So we focus on that on a every time I'm going to farms, I'm having those conversations and making sure they're doing the best they can there. And then The other side that maybe we've talked a little bit less on, but we're starting to do more of, is internal biosecurity, which is kind of when you have a disease in your farm, not spreading it week over week over week to the next pigs, and just kind of limiting it to as few pigs as possible, or one area of the barn, and not kind of spreading it around. And so that I've definitely become more and more involved with, and learn quite a few things over the years. But really separating different areas of the barn physically, like with like people, even ideally, or at least the equipment that they're using, that goes a long ways in minimizing disease transmission, kind of from one area to the next.
Yeah, it's funny because even when I see biosecurity, that's what I'm thinking is outside the barn and preventing things from getting in. And I think, a lot of times we then just figure, okay, now that we're in, we're okay. And you don't have to worry about it, right? And yeah, so I was going to say, like, well, what aspects would you look at? Because, I think the first thing that comes to mind is like all in, all out, right? You're not going to have a continuous flow type situation. But like you said, it's equipment and people as well. So so the other thing I wanted to ask with maybe biosecurity, and we can also then maybe move to other aspects as well. Like, what is something in your experience then do you see, like, this always seems to come up as an issue that maybe the producers or whatever don't generally do very well, and what's something that that they seem to all get and implement really well?
On the biosecurity side? Okay. Yeah.
No, we'll start with the biosecurity. I mean, then we can go to the other protocols as well, just because we're on that right now. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I would say on biosecurity, we've talked quite a lot about the entrances, like the entrances into barns. So we have like a bench barrier, typically like a Danish entry, we call it, where there's a bench barrier where they have to take your shoes off on the outside and then kind of change your clothes, all that kind of one-way flow. I would say in general, they've done well on that. Many farms have implemented that and really understand the people side of things. And I would also say the trucking industry is the other one where I think we've really stepped up the biosecurity and have done a lot better job of consistent washing and disinfecting and drying and minimizing that risk to the farms that way. Something that they don't do as well, so that's the main entrance. I would say the common error or a common, it's just human nature. Like if they have to go and bang a bin or something like that, if the feed's not running, they go out a side door or whatever and will use their barn boots and walk to that bin and bang on that bin, right? So they do all this awesome stuff in the main entrance, and then they just walk outside with their boots and bang on a bin. So it's I think it's less common, I would say now, but it still happens. And yeah.
I mean, I'm guilty of that, but when I did it, I was a student at the research station in Guelph, right? So we'll put that down to training. But yeah, now I look at it and be like, oh yeah, that could be a potential problem. You're all clean and you step out, right? Like, yeah. So again, then, same question when it comes to the other health aspects and stuff that you kind of started with, maybe it's with the antibiotics or vaccines or something along those lines, something that they tend to do really well and something that, may be improved.
Those are good questions. So I find that sort of because my approach is always try to be very practical with my approach and not try to, because even with biosecurity, for example, I can make the perfect biosecurity protocol, but if no one's going to do it, well, then it becomes very useless. So I try to balance, ideal scenario with, what's actually going to get done every day. And so same thing with vaccination protocols or whatever protocol or medication protocols, anything. I try to make it very simple for the producer so that they actually can do this on a daily basis. And whoever that staff member might be, they can just grab some protocol and, that's really obvious, run with it. So I think once protocols are built with them, I think they're usually pretty good to especially vaccine protocols. They follow it quite consistently. Medication protocols, I would say they definitely tend to slide a little more. And probably that's just like my goal in life would be build a protocol with them. We're all on the same page. But if something doesn't work, let me know, and then we'll adjust, right? because I need to know if it's not working, because it's all in theory, right? In real life, things don't always work as they do on paper. So what I would say people can do is they'll see it not working, and rather than have that conversation with me, they'll try another product that they have on their shelf, and then they'll try that, and maybe that one works, and that's good. But we don't know. I don't know that it's not working. So I'm thinking my protocol is working great, and really it's not, and they're using something different. So that sometimes can lead to more issues. Like if they don't find the right product, then they can have more sow mortality or whatever else, right? That I could be helping them with and kind of preventing.
Communication pops up again. People need to talk more so that I think that's a good maybe segue into the next question that I had, because you talked about, you mentioned that you can treat every farm individually and stuff like that, but obviously every experience that you have on the different farms will lead to, your ability and inform your decision in other places as well, right? So I'm just wondering, what role that plays. And you've also mentioned, the industry partners and collaboration and everything, and how much that all kind of interplays into making sure that you're giving the best protocol that you think is available to your clients.
Yeah. So to me, it's all about collaboration. So I again, my best day is when the producers has a great day, the nutritionist has a great day, the genetics company has a great day, and I have a great day, right? And whoever else is involved, right? I've seen definitely where you can collaborate with kind of all those different branches all together, and at the same time, it's really powerful. Because I go into a farm, I see something, and I'm like, okay, well, there could be a feed component here, or there could be a genetic component here, and so then, yeah, they can go talk to those different industry partners, and that works. But nothing beats if you're all in the same room together. You can point fingers at each other and talk through it much more efficiently and more effectively if you're actually right there. So, and they're like, no, that's not really my problem. It's more yours, Kurt. And so anyways, I find, no question. It's all about collaborations to get the producer's perspective, get the nutritionist perspective, and kind of we all work together to kind of solve the problem and kind of help the producer be successful ultimately.
Yeah, I mean, I saw a little bit about that at the vet conference that that we were both speaking at and everything, and the majority of the conference was case studies, and I'm just like, this is not my milieu. I'm not used to this type thing, but I can see that it would be beneficial to talk about what's going on, and even then saying, we don't have a solution to this one yet. Does anybody in the audience know what's going on, right?
That was my presentation.
Call me out and be like, oh, is it the mycotoxins? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, that's right. Like, and that's where, even collaboration with colleagues and trying to get their input and ideas, and ask other people their take on it from the same situation. Yeah. We do that all the time. Like Cordell and I talk all the time about different cases, and even with their partners across Canada. It's
pushed more in the scientific community as well. We should be collaborating with other researchers. So obviously, the more communication we have, the better. You mentioned earlier, the antimicrobial use. If you see something coming up, or and I'm just wondering, because you proposed it as a potential topic too, right? The whole antimicrobial use and resistance, and kind of reducing that and everything, and just maybe talk about that concept a little bit. What efforts you're making to do it, and I know you said you're working on like a benchmarking or some kind of project with Alberta Pork along these lines. So maybe just talk about this a little bit more.
Yeah. So obviously the world has put in a lot of pressure on everybody, but especially I think food animal producers, on reducing antimicrobial usage, and of course because of antimicrobial resistance and its potential risk for humans, and what that negative impact could have on them, which is definitely real. So what we've done with Alberta Pork, it was, I guess, that project ended in 2022, but it was kind of looking at the usage on farms for the previous 5 years or I guess it was 2017 to 2020, 2016 to 2020. We looked at the antimicrobial usage, just purchases. So we didn't look at exact treatment on the farm, but overall purchases of antimicrobials. And we did a pilot project with them, and really to understand, first of all, like how much antibiotics do we use, right? There's quite a big difference between what somebody uses in Manitoba versus Quebec versus Ontario versus Alberta. We have different challenges, different kind of ways of doing things. And so, we did kind of a pilot project with Precision and Alberta Pork, and it was really eye-opening to see there's huge variation from farm to farm on antimicrobial usage. And this is, of course, partially related to the disease challenges that each farm faces, but it's also can be related to just how they manage their system and how open or closed they are to using antibiotics. And so I think the future is is less and less antibiotics, of course. And that's always my approach when I'm going on farm is, okay, we use as much as we need to, but as little as possible. So we try to remove as much as we possibly can. But sometimes welfare can be impacted if you truly remove all antibiotics. So that's where you kind of put them in a really strategic place to limit that. But some of the key findings, there were quite a few, but some of the key findings were any feed usage in the finish or grow finish section results in huge amounts of usage because every pig is getting it, and they're getting it every day in the feed for weeks, right? So anytime you can pull out antibiotics out of the feed, it's huge amount of reduction and a huge amount of cost savings. So doing strategic something in the water for 5 days versus 4 weeks straight in the feed, massive differences. Other areas I would say is many injections, like sows, it's mostly injectable, I would say. But even in the nursery, again, feed is the number one driver there, but also water medication. But ultimately, the goal of the project was to first figure out, okay, where are you using it and why? And then is there ways we can maybe do something differently and use less in this area or more strategically and that type of thing. But it's not like a scorecard or something like that. Oh, you fail and you pass, because there's lots of different reasons for why people have to use antibiotics. But I think as an industry, we constantly have to be watching and trying to do better, because if we don't do our part, which I think we are, if we don't though, then we're going to get regulation put on us. And that's going to be a lot different than just us self-regulating.
Yeah, it's almost, by drawing attention to it with the ban on, antimicrobial growth promotants, right, has kind of put a target on this to be like, well, what are we actually using and what is the impact, right? Which, I think has surprised a lot of people when it comes to that, right? But unless you know, like you said, unless you have the benchmark and know where you are, you have no idea if you're making improvements or not. And I think also, identifying the areas that are potentially targets that we could reduce this.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know for nutrition, it's been one of those things where I've been telling people, I think the antibiotics has allowed the nutritionists to be lazy for a lot of it, right? Because it's like we didn't have to worry about gut development, immune development, and all this other stuff because we took care of that with the antibiotics. And now we're having to be like, well, how do we actually feed these pigs without those in there, right?
Yeah, no, totally. And same thing, like there's definitely some diseases that we can vaccinate for, right? So you can vaccinate for a disease rather than having to treat them after the fact, right? So you're preventing the disease again at a much lower cost than the cost of the disease plus the treatment and the antimicrobial usage on top of that. So I think we've come a long ways in a lot of diseases. We, of course, don't have vaccines for everything, but yeah, you need kind of the bigger approach, like you said, with nutrition as well, and bringing it all together.
Yeah. So I have one more question before we get to your take home. This is a little bit separate from the rest of the topic, so I apologize if I'm catching you off guard. But one of the things that has come up is, the lack of people that are going into swine in general, and the lack of people that are going into swine medicine. And where do you see your role in promoting this, or what would you say to those people that, might be considering going somewhere else and try to get them, to consider pigs? You were poisoned by your dad to get into it, right? Like, so, but how, those people that don't have that, what would you say to them?
Yeah, it's tough. Like the industry is, for biosecurity reasons, is very closed off to outsiders, right? There's very little access to barns nowadays, as a general population, right? So people don't get exposure, and if you don't know what you don't know, well, you're not going to get into it, right? So
Yeah.
I think, yeah, no, you're right. I was lucky. I literally, before I could walk, I was in the pig barn, so I knew pigs very, very well, and I know pigs well. So I see my role is supporting anybody that's interested, and giving them access, and at least showing them what the world can be like. I think it's a great world, and I really enjoy what I do, and food animal medicine, to me, we're still a great place to raise pigs, and a great safe food source. And so I think it starts before me, though. I think it starts in earlier, well, in high, even growing up in schools, they need like some kind of exposure ideally, but even then like in college and stuff, to get some more exposure to Prairie Swine Center or U of A farm, or whatever that looks like, to at least see what a pig is, and what the world's all about. And then on the vet side, so that on the business side, like on the pig business side, like I would say part of it is our world has been complaining a lot about losing money and all that kind of stuff, which it's not an easy world. I'm not denying that. It's not for the faint of heart, but I think they're doing better than maybe they let off. And so if for young farmers, when they look at the grain guys that are always saying, oh, I'm making money every year, and the pork guys that are saying, oh, I'm losing money every year. Well, if I was a young guy, why would I go into the pork industry rather than going into the grain industry, right? So I think we need to change that conversation a little bit, to try to show that it's a little more complex than what meets the eye. And then on the vet side, I think it just goes back to exposure, and for us to make sure they, at early enough along in their vet career, or vet student career, I should say, that they've seen what a pig is, and been on farms, and ride along with vets to understand what we do every day. And I think that'll actually, I think we'll still have some, and there are some still coming through. It's just a matter of getting them early enough, and stealing them before they go somewhere else in the food animal world.
Yeah, no, where I work, we do our part. We are a research organization, so if we're not going to bring in anybody, then who is? But we've definitely seen an uptick in the interest by just allowing the students to come in. Even the undergrads now, the class comes in and talks about it. But I agree with you. I think we need to be a little bit more positive when it comes to talking about the industry. I was actually asked recently, would you teach optimism, with pork? And I'm like, well, yeah, why not? There's all kinds of opportunity, and we're in a bad time kind of right now, but we know things will get better. Yeah. And it's always, producers always rise to the challenge. So yeah, I would agree with you there. Okay, so before we get to our final three questions, I'm just going to ask, for our listeners today, what would be like one or two take-home messages that you want them to get from our discussion?
I think the take-home is work closely with your veterinarian to really ensure they understand the health on their farm, and really build protocols and treatment protocols, vaccine protocols, kind of to really focus on their needs, on your needs as a producer. That to me is the number one, I would say, is work with your veterinarian. And I think on the AMU side, I would say there's lots of opportunities. There's lots of variation also farm by farm, but I would say also, like, Alberta Pork is having actually another project here right now for the next few years. So join that program if you're in Alberta, and learn about what you're using. First of all, learn about what you're using, and then you can kind of focus on strategies to use less or more strategically.
Yeah, no, that's great.
It's time for our famous three.
Okay, so now we're at our big three questions that we ask all our guests. So our first one is, what would be your favorite or your go-to swine related resource?
So I'm a big fan of interacting with my colleagues rather than reading a textbook. I'm not one to love reading textbooks or anything like that. So my big resource would be actually my colleagues and partners within kind of our swine vet partners group. If we have any issues or anything or any questions that I'd have, I would reach out to them and kind of interact with them and kind of get their experience and inputs first before I would kind of search for myself, I guess, try to steal their knowledge first before digging deeper otherwise.
Yeah. And then our next question then is, what would be a book outside of ag or outside of pigs, that you would recommend that people look up?
So it's a book I read a long time ago, but I still think about it. So it's called The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. Anyways, it's a story that looking at a kind of a young guy that has to travel all across Egypt to figure out, to find a treasure ultimately. And I think it's a book that kind of teaches you to kind of believe in yourself and kind of follow your dreams and kind of when things go wrong, kind of get it back up and kind of never give up, and that the journey can be sometimes just as important as the outcome itself. So for me, I'm definitely a kind of results-driven person. So to remind myself that the journey can sometimes be equally as important as the outcome is, I thought was really good.
Yeah, no, that's great. I have to add it to the list. So getting to be a very long list, but it's on there. So then our final question, and for a lot of people, I've asked on with respect to leaders, but maybe you are more in a position to talk about successful swine producers, and
Sure.
What is a characteristic that you think they all share that makes them particularly successful?
Yeah, so I think to make a successful swine producer, I think they need to be able to listen to sort of people that they're hiring for advice ultimately, and the people around them, their staff included. They need to listen to what's going on. They need to be able to adapt to the whatever challenges are facing them, and they need to be able to implement. I think they need to be able to, if something needs to be changed or needs to happen, they need to make it happen. I think that's critical. They need to follow through, and then in my mind, they really need to be willing to change. Our industry, if your status quo is your goal, you're going to be falling behind in a hurry. So the top producers are constantly willing to change and try new things and think outside the box to try to keep pushing themselves forward and improving. Yeah.
No, I agree with you on that one. I use the word be the disruptor, but I don't think people generally like that one. But it's the same type of thing, right? If you think that what has been done in the past is going to continue to work, it's like, well, you're going to be stagnant just like that, right? So, no, I think that's great information. So that brings us to the end of our podcast. So I'll thank you again for coming on. Great topic and a lot of good information. And I'm sure we'll have you on again in the future.
Sounds good. Thanks so much, Dan.